So we finally get on to the final Red Dwarf novel, Backwards, and after the disappointment in '95 of Last Human, I was more than pleasantly surprised when I read Backwards. This is definitely a marked improvement over Last Human for me. And indication really that it is unfortunate that Doug Naylor is the writer that stayed on as the writer of Red Dwarf and not Rob Grant, and it is a shame that this is Rob Grant's last output when it comes to anything Red Dwarf related. The plot is what you would have expected from a sequel to Better Than Life, much more so than Last Human. Structurally it holds a candle to Better Than Life. Tonally, it's much more consistent with Better Than Life, and it picks up exactly where you think that a sequel to Better Than Life is going to pick up. It picks up at Niagara Falls, 34 years after the 60-year-old Lister is left on Earth to grow young with Kachansky. The only rug pull here is that he turns up there having just escaped from the police, or the police have stopped chasing him, because he's just spent the last 9 years in prison for murder, and he doesn't know whether he was guilty or not.
There were 2 policemen opposite him on one either side, all of them glowering at him relentlessly. Despite all this, Lister was feeling pretty damn good. The last 8 years or so had been fairly hellish, and at last his ordeal was almost over. Without warning, the policeman on his left slammed the palm of his hand against the side of Lister's head, which stopped the throbbing and returned his hearing to normal.
He meets up with the crew, and a chase ensues. All the banter between the characters is there.
Are you telling me you're about to steal this vehicle? Not necessarily. Maybe I'm going to buy it. At the highest, most obscure peak of an obscure mountain range, presumably from one of the many discount second-hand car showrooms that flourish there. Maybe we buy it from a farmer or something. Lister, there is only one type of people live in the most obscure peaks of obscure mountains. Strange people. People who don't like other people. Hermit-type inbreed people with criss-cross front teeth and a penchant for stews well stocked with human flesh. People who, when other people take something away from them, are not averse to shooting at those other people with bullets.
The crew have a reverse chase up into the mountains, into hillbilly country, which I don't think geographically really lines up with where Niagara Falls is in the States. I don't really think of the border of Canada as being hillbilly country. I think that's more sort of Midwest, southern part of America. But okay, well, let's go with it. This is a British view of the American landscape. They end up in Deliverance country, where Crichton accidentally removes an axe from the chest of a hillbilly.
Crichton was trying to yank the pickaxe loose, but the mountain man was holding it in his own chest with phenomenal adrenal strength. Then suddenly he let go, and with a gruesome crunching gloop, Crichton jerked the pickaxe free.
So it transpires that Lister spent 9 years in prison because of a crime that Crichton uncommitted. They then attempt to leave, but they miss the window to transverse the omniverse.
Crichton, let me put it another way. Just how long are we going to be stuck here on this hellhole, you oversized ugly dildo? Crichton stammered. 4 hours? 4 weeks? 4 months? Crichton thumped his head against the airlock door. 10 years.
We then leap forward 10 years, so Kat and Lister have continued to de-age and now 15 years old in the story. So this is a really fun Rob Grant-esque idea of having 15-year-old 15-year-old virgins and 15-year-old versions of our main characters. So a lot of jokes about acne and masturbation in there.
Have they been out all night? Crichton nodded. Did you tell them we're looking to leave before 8? Crichton nodded. I don't suppose they paid much attention? Crichton shook his head. Rimmer muttered, "Gits," and strolled underneath Starbug. What bothers me is that pair of irresponsible gimboids are going to have to pilot this damn thing. It's going to be a hell of a ride, crashing backwards through those trees while those 2 masturbate furiously up front.
They then catch the window and end up back in their reality, but find that, much like in The Last Human actually, that Red Dwarf is now missing, so we get another Starbug-centric story. It turns out that while they've been away, a race of simulants called the Agonoids, whose sole mission is to seek out human life and torture them, but in very fun ways. So you get these simulant characters with names like Pizak, Rap, and Dung Eep.
If you are fortunate enough to be the one, how will you dispatch the snivelling bastard? I have given it much thought, and I have decided to saw off the top of his skull with a blunt blade and slowly spoon out his brains before his eyes, whilst simultaneously kicking him in the gonads with a steel-capped boot until they are pulped to a mush resembling in colour and consistency boysenberry jam. Not bad. What it lacks in finesse, it makes up for in spectacle. Oh, I thought I might split open his stomach with a pair of rusty scissors, force-feed him his own spleen, liver, pancreas and kidneys raw, then tug out his bowels and hold them over his face until the offal works its way through what's left of his digestive system and drown him in his own crap.
However, where this coincides with the TV series is the introduction of one Ace Rimmer, who I can't believe they made it all the way to the fourth novel without introducing him as a character. Like the previous novels, his introduction and his story kind of lines up with what happens in the TV episode.
I'll be in my quarters at lunchtime, covered in Tirama Salata.
But there's much greater elaboration on the events of the TV series because there's only so much information you can get into a half-hour sitcom.
Ace lit one of his rare cheroots, his only vice unless you counted an extremely active, multi-partnered sex life as a vice, which Ace didn't. I believe we've cracked the reality barrier. The reality barrier. Tranter leaned forward. He had no idea what the reality barrier might be, but it sounded good. It sounded wonderfully promotional.
So you read about Ace and Spanners, but there's a greater explanation as to why the Lister in that universe has ended up not on Red Dwarf.
Is Luke Pemberton still on board? Pemberton? Sure. Said I should say hello from him. He's got 2 promotions since you saw him last. Officer class now. Lewis Pemberton. Lister smiled. He wouldn't have lasted 2 months on Red Dwarf without Lou as his roommate. He was the guy who brought Lister and Kaczynski back together after their first bust-up. It was Pemberton who encouraged him to sign up for night classes in mechanics, even helped him with his homework. No question, you'd be looking at a different Dave Lister right now if it hadn't been for Pemberton.
You get to see peppered throughout the novel what's only slightly alluded to at the end of Dimension Jump about the difference between Ace and Rimmer, the events that sent them off in different directions. In the TV series, it was because one of them was kept down a year. But then the pivotal point in the novel is a race. We see both versions of the race, the one that was done by Rimmer.
And then his heel explodes with pain, and he's falling, his arms flailing, grabbing out for the black and yellow tape, and his chin thumps into the red clay, scrawping him a red scabby beard. Dickie Duckworth's chest bursts the tape. Slowing down, he looks over his shoulder down at Rimmer and mouths a 2-syllable word, Rimmer's nickname, Bonehead.
And is humiliating in front of the whole school. And the second version, which is where Ace runs the race.
And suddenly, Rimmer's aware that the boy on his right is mumbling. He turns. It's Bobby Derrick. His eyes are screwed up like a newborn puppy's. Rimmer can't quite make out what the kid's saying, but it sounds as if it could be a whispered prayer. He's a good sprinter, little Derrick. Rimmer usually picks him first for team games, partly because of his speed, and partly because the boy's parents divorced just before Christmas, and his father leaving home has been pretty tough on him.
And almost wins, but then decides to let the underdog win, so he comes in second. Probably the big difference between this and the TV version, though, is that Ace doesn't save the day in this novel, and that's a real rug pull. It's probably slightly surprising because Ace Rimmer befalls a fate you probably wouldn't have expected Ace Rimmer to befall.
Just hang on, Lister yelled. We're coming to get you. Shouldn't bother if I were you, old cucumber. We're going far too fast for your old rust box to catch us. Looks like I'll be signing off now. Smoke me a kipper, lads. I'll be back for... Then there was a pop and the roaring of a terrible wind, then a muffled, wet explosion. Then there was just a deep, abiding silence.
But I thought it was fun. It was shocking and almost anarchic in a way. I think that's what I like about this novel. It's the most anarchic of the Red Dwarf novels. Rob Grant, given free rein from his writing partner, he went and created a novel which felt a lot more like The Young Ones than Red Dwarf in its characterization here. Lots of really base jokes, as I said, about masturbating and pimple squirting. We read about the cat losing his virginity in this, and a really unpleasant detail about cats' anatomy is revealed that's consistent with real cats, actually. And the rug pull of having Ace Rimmer's fate not play out in the same way that it does in the TV version is a lot of fun. Of course, the most fun element, the part that really made me love this novel, was the inclusion of my favourite Red Dwarf episode in novel form, Gunmen of the Apocalypse, which works so well on the page. And I can't believe I didn't see it coming, because in part 3 of the novel, it just cuts to a sheriff in an old western town and describes his day-to-day life. And I can't believe from the get-go I didn't cotton on to the fact that this is going to be Gunmen of the Apocalypse. But of course, for anyone who knows Gunmen of the Apocalypse, the sheriff in the old western town turns out to be Crichton, who's been infected by a virus that the Agonoids have infected Starbug with, and he's playing out a scenario in which he's trying to figure out an antidote to the virus. So you get the Gunmen of the Apocalypse episode plays out, and it's fairly consistent with what happens in the TV show. And then, like Last Human, the book ends with the death of Rimmer. Unlike Last Human, it also ends with the death of Crichton.
He grabbed the girder and pulled. He moved it just enough to see that Crichton was crushed beyond repair. Ugly black smoke whisked up from inside. The circuits were charred and warped. The cat peered over his shoulder. "Bad as it looks?" he asked. "Yes, Crichton and Rimmer are both totaled."
But then the teenage Lister and Cat take Ace's ship, transverse the Omniverse, and end up in an alternate dimension in which both Cat and Lister are dead.
Crichton looked perplexed. "I don't understand, sir. You're dead. We buried you some time ago. You and the cat. You were both trapped in a lethally addictive game. There was nothing we could do to save you."
And they figure, oh, this one's close enough. This book isn't better than life, but it does hold a candle to it. As I said before, tonally and elementally, it feels far more consistent with Better Than Life than Last Human does, and it's a far more fun read than Last Human. It has the same zippy, fun quality that both Infinity and Better Than Life has, and so that's why it scores over that book for me. And it's more in keeping with previous novels in the recycling of the episode plot lines, which was far more refreshing. It feels disingenuous to criticise a book like Last Human for having original elements in it, but when the original elements don't work and the recycled elements do, hey, that's a criticism, and this is why it's a better book for me. I'm going to stop comparing it to Last Human now. I'm just going to end and say it's just a good read. It's fun. It's very schoolboy, sure. Possibly the most childish that Red Dwarf has ever got.
Crichton turned. "Oh, I don't think they masturbate excessively, sir. Not for young men of their age. Are you kidding? It's like the bloody monkey house up in those rest quarters. I swear to God they don't even stop during meal breaks."
And that's probably largely due to Rob Grant's childish nature, but it is a really fun read. Like Better Than Life, it uses the concept of the backwards episode, if not the actual storyline, but conceptually pretty much all the same things happen. And yeah, as I said, this is a real shame that it was Rob Grant's Red Dwarf Swan Song. Combine this with Last Human, and they could have easily written something that surpassed Better Than Life, or produced something that was more epic in scope. I think that's what I take away from the last two Red Dwarf novels, is that it's a shame that these writers split up. There's no two ways about it. The series would have benefited from them continuing to write together, and the novel series would have benefited from them continuing to write together. That's for sure. But hey, those are my thoughts on the novels. At the end of the day, they're still 4 entertaining reads. Despite my my criticisms of Last Human, there's not really a bad book in this series, in this quadrilogy, whatever you want to call it, and they are still some of my favourite books. When it just comes to pure entertaining reads, I can happily sit down and devour these just for pure pleasure and fun. Anyway, thanks for joining me, folks. This is a video I've been meaning to do for a while. I finally got it out of my system, and I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I hope you enjoyed reading the Red Dwarf novels if you haven't done. And as I've said before, I don't think this is going to be the last of my Red Dwarf videos. There are still more to come. I've still got more ideas, so look out for them. So thanks for joining me, folks. If you stay with me for this long, thank you very much. This is me, Big Buddha, signing off, and I shall see everyone out there in YouTube land.